My name is Jonah Jonathan, and welcome once again to the Jazz Musician's Voice. Today I have the wonderful opportunity of interviewing Erica Seguine, a wonderful composer and arranger and pianist, a fellow student of mine at William Patterson University, and she originates from East Greenbush, New York, and attended Eastman School of Music undergrad. She's a wonderful woman in jazz, female jazz musician, and someone who really has a lot to offer. I really enjoyed doing this interview with her over Skype. So we hope you enjoy this interview. Please subscribe and like this video and stay tuned because we have a lot more feature content coming. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm here and I'm fortunate to speak with Erica Seguine, a friend of mine from William Patterson days. I believe I was an undergrad student just when you were coming in for your master's at William Patterson. And for people who don't know, Erica is an incredible pianist and composer and arranger, especially for large ensembles. So I want to go back to your earlier days. Believe it or not, we come from like a pretty close region in upstate New York. You are from East Greenbush, right?
Yes. Yeah, East Greenbush is literally east of the Hudson River from Albany, New York, which is the capital of New York. So yeah, I actually live about 5 to 10 minutes away from the downtown Albany area, actually, or grew up there.
Yeah, well, that is quite a great area for jazz, actually, or at least it was over the past years. I moved there when I was a kid from Hawaii. I moved to Canaan, New York, which is not that far. It's about 30 or 40 minutes from Albany. And then later on, I was in Williamstown, Massachusetts, but continued my connection with like Chatham, New York region and some of the guys there. And we did do a lot of gigs around that area, the capital region.
Yeah, I know actually, did you know Tom Finn at all? By chance?
Yes,
I think
yes.
Yeah, was in Chatham.
Very good friend of mine. Actually, I met Tom Finn and his dad, Joe Finn, who was a guitarist. Right. And in fact, they had some ensembles, and we were able to play all around. We did stuff in like Steventown, New York, and we did the Kingston Jazz Festival. And yeah, Joe is a cat. He actually also does stuff in Saratoga Springs. So yeah, that was a great experience. And yeah, it is a kind of small scene, but for me, it's probably one of the reasons that I got involved in jazz, because there were a lot more gigs for me as a bass player than there normally would be, I believe, in New York for a young player, because there's just a lot more wider field.
Yeah, that's true. Also, like up there, were you aware at all of the Empire State Youth Orchestra and their ensembles, SEO?
Yes, I heard of it. I never was part of it, but I know that Tom Finn was part of that, right?
Yeah, I was part of the, I was in their jazz ensemble, SEO's jazz ensemble for a couple years, and I was in the youth orchestra my last year, my senior year. I actually played clarinet all the way through high school too. So I played clarinet and bass clarinet in the top youth orchestra there, and played piano in the jazz ensemble. And yes, that's how I knew Tom, actually.
Wow, that's great. I mean, yes, I think my disconnect from that was that I was in Massachusetts and wasn't part of the school system that got involved with the whole jazz scene there. But yes, that whole area is quite a few musicians. I was fortunate to get hooked up with I went to Berkshire Community College, jazz courses with a guy named Alan Livermore, and I reached out to credible teacher Andy Jaffe, who was through Williams College. So yes, that area did have quite a few connections. How did you initially get started playing piano?
I actually started, relatively speaking, compared to other pianists I know. I started when I was 9 years old. I had this teacher named Krista. I loved her, and she encouraged me to compose my own music and just be really creative, actually, on the piano. So I studied with her for a couple of years. And yeah, like I began composing, making up my own pieces when I was 10 years old. And then later on, it wasn't until like high school, kind of towards about mid-high school, that I was really starting to get into jazz playing a lot. Before that, it was really mostly classical playing. Let's see. I also I started learning about chords and stuff, because actually I first start learning harmony by ear. I'd start making up pieces with these harmonies, but I wouldn't know what chord symbols were over them. I would just be like, oh, I like this sound, I like that sound. And later on, actually, I was in the middle school jazz band playing, and of course they had those Kendor charts and stuff where they have the written voicings and the chord symbol above. And I started noticing a correlation between what the symbol was saying and the voicing that was written. So for example, a chord that I saw as like an F major chord plus the E, which I always felt like that almost there note when I was a kid. I was like, oh, that's an F major 7. So I started figuring out chords by just noticing that there was common similarities between what was written and the symbol above it too. So
what prompted you to decide to follow music professionally and go to Eastman School of Music? That's in Rochester, New York. That is pretty far from New York. So what prompted you to go that direction? And you did eventually come to New York, but you made that decision to go to Eastman.
Yeah. So first of all, to continue with music, to pursue music, I felt like when I started composing, making up pieces, I just felt like there's something in me that knew this felt like a calling to me. I've never felt so centered than if I was writing music or creating music. So I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. Why I chose Eastman in Rochester, at the time, actually, my parents did not want me to have anything to do with going down to the city. My mom grew up in the very northern part of the Bronx, actually, when she was growing up.
Yeah. And
she was she wanted me to have nothing to do with even being close to there. So I felt like I was kind of in a bind, at a point there. So unfortunately, schools that were directly in the city or were kind of out of the question at the time. But part of the reason I chose Eastman actually was because I felt like there was a lot of opportunities to do a lot of crossover between jazz and classical, because Eastman has a really high classical program there too. So there was things they had a studio orchestra where it was combined a big band with strings that there was opportunities to write for. There was a lot of opportunities to write where maybe a combination of a jazz rhythm section with a string quartet that not necessarily a lot of other schools had that free of opportunities to do. There are some other schools that do have that, but I felt there particularly, there was just a lot of opportunities for that because it was into both a lot of jazz music as well as classical music.
Well, yeah, I mean, Eastman is a pretty legendary school. A lot of great musicians went through there. Even my teacher Ron Carter was there. It's a pretty prestigious school. They did not have jazz at that time, but
Right.
Mr. Carter had was playing in some of the fraternities parties, like in that period in the 50s, you know.
Yeah.
But that school just has a great reputation, and actually a kind of good location too, because it's not far from Canada. Um,
Sure.
you can go to Toronto, I believe. It's not that far.
Toronto. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But what was the music scene like there at Eastman? Like for jazz, were you playing gigs while attending school as well?
Um, I was more when I attended Eastman there, I was the technical major term at the time was Jazz Studies and Contemporary Media Writing Concentration. Very verbose name for a major in jazz composition, essentially. So I was actually focusing most of my work, even though I was studying piano there, I was focusing most of my work actually as a composer there. So actually didn't do that much playing, although a lot of my peers did. So like, yeah, like a lot of my peers from like the jazz department, they were playing gigs nearby. Like there was a coffee shop that a lot of students were regularly playing at. There was also a lot of faculty concerts, both jazz and classical, and some other music too. There to check out on a regular basis, almost on a nightly basis. There was a concert or two going on. But my focus there was actually more as a composer arranger than as a pianist for me.
Well, you know, you finished that program and you made the decision to come to William Patterson University, which is where I met you. And obviously, at that time, you were able to study with some heavyweights there, William Patterson in composition and arranging, Rich DeRosa and Jim McNeely.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about your decision to come to New Jersey and how that experience was for you.
Well, the biggest motivation to come to William Patterson was the idea of studying with Rich DeRosa and Jim McNeely, essentially. That's why I came down to William Patterson. And by that point, also, after kind of convincing, like, I mean, well, by this point, I was more free to get closer to the city because I was mentioning before that was part of why before I was limited. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go near New York City. That's where the whole music scene is happening, and to study with Rich and Jim, which I feel was totally the right decision. I learned so much from both Rich. Rich I studied with my first year, right before he moved actually to teach at North Texas. So it was his last year, William Patterson. And Jim I studied with my second year. And they both like really opened my eyes in a different way. Like when I did my undergrad at Eastman, it was, I studied with Bill Dobbins there, and it was a lot about details. It was all about like voicings and voice leading and being very particular about maybe leaving a certain note out of this voicing so that when you get to this next harmony, it feels more fresh. But with Jim and Rich, it was more about developing a larger story and about like developing a feeling. So all the stuff that I didn't go over much in undergrad, I was able to learn and kind of absorb in grad school. So I'm very grateful to all my teachers who I've learned from over the years.
So, kind of, you know, expanding on that, who would you say during your school years were some of the big band composers and arrangers that really inspired you and the people you studied?
So, like, who are some of the big band leaders I was inspired by?
Yeah, yeah. Who were some of your influences, do you feel?
Yeah. So One of the first big bands I heard a recording of, and this was when I was in high school, was Thad Jones. Actually, I was given a CD of Consummation, that album, and when I first played the first track, which was called Dedication, I was like, about a couple minutes in, there's like this like big accelerando that happens for a couple bars and then goes big into this like blues after that. It was just like one of the most exhilarating things I've ever heard. So Thad Jones was one of the my first big band influences, people I was inspired by. I love Maria Schneider's writing. I heard her writing a little like towards the end of high school. Someone told me about her, and since I was so into like this whole jazz and classical kind of combination, like when I first heard her music, I was like, wow, that's exactly like what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
And see, later on, I started getting into Bob Brookmeyer, Darcy James Argue, John Hollenbeck, of course, Duke. And then later on, like I'm also currently inspired by a lot of the composers that my peers who are currently on the scene too, writing music, like Meg Okura, G. Haley, Remy LeBoeuf, Brian Kroc, Miho Hazama. I'm inspired by them as well as far as current composers.
Well, I mean, you had quite a few influences, and in 2011, you co-founded the Erica Seguine and Shan Baker Jazz Orchestra. So let's talk a little bit about this. The 21-piece orchestra that's been performing throughout the New York City area. Can you talk a little bit about this project and some of the mindset going into your compositions for this project?
Yeah. So Shan and I had a joint grad recital at William Patterson in 2011. And we felt it was a good idea to start our own big band after that. So our recital was kind of like the jumping point to the beginning of our jazz orchestra. I think we had our first actual gig in June 2011, so about a month after our grad recital. And we've had our band now, for almost a decade, which is something I guess that like it's quite a feat.
Yeah, you've been together for quite some time.
Yeah. We would play, we played a lot in the New York City area. At one point, I noticed that when you had your interview with Paolo and Nate a couple days ago, that they mentioned the venue Insanity, actually. At one point, we had a monthly gig there in 2013, early 2014. We had a monthly gig at Insanity where we brought the whole big band in for monthly gigs, which probably wasn't, looking back at it, I'm not sure if that was the most legal thing to do. Like, it was a bigger space, but it's not that big. Like, we're all like crammed into like this corner, like if there was a fire, I think probably wouldn't have been that safe. But, anyway, so like we were able to really develop, our sound during that time. Before that, we were playing at some places, like we played at Trumpets, we played at like what was then Something Jazz Club. After our monthly gig that we played a lot at ShapeShifter Lab in Brooklyn, we played at the Jazz Gallery a couple times, played at the Tea Lounge / Slope Lounge / Sir D's, that whole venue there.
I remember I think the Something Jazz Club used to be Miles Jazz Cafe before that.
Right.
I played some
gigs over there. But then because of legal issues, of using the name, so I think, right, they had to rename.
Yeah, that's great that you're playing all over the place. For me personally, my real experience with big bands comes from playing subbing for Marcus McLaurin with the George G. Orchestra. And
Nice.
big band charts are not easy. I mean, I think that book had like 600 tunes, and all of a sudden George G would just call out a tune, and you gotta flip to it and read it, and that's. I don't think people understand the amount of work that goes into big band music.
Yeah, like when we had our monthly, I don't know if can I talk about like, when we had our monthly gigs
Yeah,
or,
yeah,
okay. So when we had our monthly gigs at Insanity, for example, we would have them the first Tuesday of the month. So the Monday night, literally before, first of all, we spent, going actually back before that. So usually almost immediately after whatever gig we had, we'd start emailing out the band and be like, okay, who can make this next day? We wait for responses, find subs when someone can't do the gig, and then keep going down a list, right? About a week before, we would determine the set that we're going to play ahead of time. So we'd give everyone like a heads up. Okay, we're going to be playing these tunes, and we had this database actually on our website with all the parts to all the charts. So it's like, okay, we're going to play these tunes if you want to check out the tunes that we're going to be playing. The night before, Monday night, usually before our gig, we would be actually at Insanity rearranging the furniture, because there was usually all these sofas and tables where the band would normally be sitting, and we'd be setting up the chairs ahead of time, setting up the drum set. And then the day of the gig, usually it was, we'd have this carpool set up. So we had different carpools. We'd be running out to get pizza and everything for the band. Setting up, sound checking. Yeah. And that's not even talking about writing the music or formatting the parts or taping parts, and tape usually comes undone, so you have to constantly retape parts and stuff.
Well, it's really quite a process for big bands, and I don't think a lot of people realize how much work goes into being a composer for jazz music. I've had a little experience. I'm part of an orchestra here in the Vermont area. It's called the Me Too Orchestra, and we have it's like music for mental health. And part of the orchestra is all classical music, and there's something to be said about being able to play classical music well, but I don't think people realize how hard it is with jazz, because you're not only reading compositions, but you're improvising as well. So, could you talk a little bit about your process as a composer and arranger? I'm sure in this day and age, you probably have either Sibelius or Finale, right? And or are you writing stuff out physically, or?
So first of all, I currently use Sibelius. Actually, during this whole quarantine, I'm actually starting to try to figure out Dorico, just because Sibelius hasn't been updating for years now, and I have like a big fear that's going to go extinct soon. So I've been trying Dorico, which is essentially the original developers of Sibelius have been for years working on this project, coming up with something even more intuitive than Sibelius. So I've been actually experimenting with that. But when I'm writing, I generally do write out by hand, especially if it's my own pieces. I write out a lot by hand. I start sketching ideas sometimes. Sometimes I'll write out actual parts by hand at first. There's a big connection that pencil to paper that you cannot get if you're just like automatically inputting into a notation program. So I do a lot of writing by hand. As far as process for the pieces, it really depends on what I'm trying to say or express. Like, I feel like the most important thing is to find the essence of whatever I'm writing and understand its energy, and then develop a process of writing the piece based on that, which is different piece to piece. Like, for example, there's this piece I wrote that's essentially this reel that was influenced by when I was playing Celtic tunes on a hammered dulcimer and on tin whistles. So I created a reel. So my first part of part of writing it was to try to make the reel as authentic as possible. So kind of like I was studying, took a couple lessons with clarinetist, actually, Andy LeMay. Don't know if you know him at all, but he was into, on top of playing clarinet, he played, tin whistle in a lot of sessions and stuff. So I learned some tunes from him and learned a little bit about like crayons and stuff like that. So I first thought was, okay, how to make the reel sound as authentic as possible as if you were playing a session, like a Celtic session. And then from there, kind of warp it into this big band work. So gradually kind of sneak it so it's more straight ahead jazz as it develops. Another piece, though, I wrote a piece, for example, on the other hand, a piece called The Ravine, which I actually first started that because I wanted to convey kind of this flow of water. I actually started with a form diagram. And I just wrote descriptions like, okay, this is supposed to be bubbling here. This is more like windy here. This is more kind of like you're zooming out because it's the ravine in Central Park and now it's kind of expanding into the city. So I actually started with a form diagram and verbal descriptions rather than actual notes at first. So it depends on piece to piece a lot, but a lot of that helps me is writing a lot pencil to paper rather than because you can't do a form diagram really on a computer. I mean, I guess you could, but it's not the same.
Well, I mean, it's really great, some of the stuff you're doing. I've checked out some of your music, and you're also really like a conductor and arranger on several projects performed by other groups. So can you talk a little bit about that whole process for young musicians who are interested in going in that direction as a composer arranger?
Okay. So first, I guess as a conductor, maybe I'll go from there. Conducting came kind of as a result of being a composer. So first of all, like I kind of had to conduct out of necessity because when we had our big band, it's like, okay, well, how are we going to get this music performed, first of all? So like, first of all, I never really saw myself as a strong player. So I was like, okay, I need to be involved in band some other way. So figured conducting plus our music is the kind of music that really needs a conductor up there, generally speaking. So I've learned how to conduct mostly out of necessity and a lot of practice with that. But then about 2014, I was invited in to be a guest composer with, there's a rehearsal band that rehearses every Tuesday night pre-quarantine called the Meeting House Jazz Orchestra. And they're a big band that rehearses at this literally Quaker meeting house at the Friends Seminary in New York City. So they rehearse Tuesday nights, and they invited me to come in as like a guest composer for their upcoming concert. And then they actually kept me on board after that. So like as a conductor and to also bring in my works, on a regular basis. So for the last 5 to 6 years up until quarantine and pandemic, actually, I was going in on Tuesday nights, and I was able to really hone in my conducting skills over the years. And then that has led to then conducting some other ensembles. So I'm a conductor with the Dome Experience, which is short for Dance, Orchestration, Multimedia Experience. And their ensemble can fluctuate, but it's like a mini studio orchestra. They have strings and, horn players and a rhythm section and dancers, and they have often a lot of projections on a screen, and their music's a lot about environment and social justice. So I'm a conductor with them. I've also conducted, subbed in as a conductor with Remy LaBeouf's Assembly of Shadows. I've conducted a couple times as a guest conductor with PJ Rasmussen's big band. I've conducted some concerts for Mega Okura when she's playing violin. So yeah, I've been starting to kind of branch out as a conductor for other ensembles, which I really enjoy doing.
That's really cool. I mean, it's. I mean, I think big band music has taken its second coming of in jazz in New York. You know, obviously I had mentioned the George G Orchestra, but I'm a big fan of the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra, and there's the Mingus Big Band, and there's so many groups, the Jazz and Lincoln Center Orchestra. Um, Another trend that I've kind of noticed recently is like video game music that a lot of jazz artists are doing. I don't know if you've been part of that, but
I have not been part of that. That being said, yes, like I've heard of like, Charlie Rosen's, 8-bit big band. And
yeah,
then I know that there's other musicians out there right now kind of doing like these, like I've heard of there's like these jazz battles going on, I think, or something like that of video game music. I mean, I haven't been honestly much involved in that world, but I do find it fascinating.
yeah, yeah. And so now I want to talk a little bit about we're trying to get more female artists on our series, and I want to talk to people about your experience as a female jazz artist. I know it's been previously a male-dominated scene, and it still kind of is, but we want you to share your experiences for female musicians who are interested.
First of all, I would say as far as particularly the composing world for big band, I feel that, and I'm really happy to see this, I feel like there's been a lot larger number of women in recent years writing for big band. And in fact, if anything, there's possibly starting to become, dare I say, a majority of women, at least in the New York City area, of women writing for big band. Like when I can just name off, on top of Maria Schneider and Toshiko Akiyoshi, there's Miho Hazama, Meg Okura, Jihei Lee, Yu Nishiyama, Anna Weber, Angela Morris. A lot of women writing right now for big band. So I'm actually very happy to see that, because like I remember, I think it was my last year in the BMI workshop. It was like for the 2014 summer concert. I was surprised when I looked at the program and I saw that 5 out of the 9 composers were women, which is something I didn't expect, because usually it's like, as you mentioned, more male dominated. And it felt like that up until that point. And then like looking at the program, I'm like, wait a moment, there's actually more women on the program than men. So I do think that particularly the composing scene is getting better. The instrumental scene, maybe not there yet. But also when I started out, I did feel more of a minority at the time when I started out. There were less women in the BMI workshop when I started. There were less women writing for big band at the time when I started. So, but I guess the most important thing as a composer, if you're, is to really think beyond, your gender. Like, don't feel like, oh, I need to write something because I need to prove that women can write for a big band, or that I need to write something exaggerating the fact that I'm a woman. It's most important to find who you are underneath all that. Like what are your likes and dislikes? What are your passion? What are you passionate about? That's more important than what gender are you.
Yeah, real great points. You are also a mentor in the Women in Jazz organization, so that must be getting more female musicians involved. Let's talk a little bit about that and teaching privately?
Yeah. So I feel like one sad thing that's been kind of sad over the years, probably because, I mean, other people have mentioned this, I'm sure, before, but with the rise of academia, is that there's a lot less of this kind of mentor relationship in general, whether you're a woman or not. That there's like a lot less of, having like someone kind of like with more experience guiding you, generally speaking, I think. So I feel like, first of all, that mentorship is really important regardless of your gender. That being said, though, there are some, I feel like, some unique issues that can sometimes happen if you are a woman. That I remember, like, when I was in college, I did come across some sexism in the jazz department, because I was, especially at Eastman, I was like one of anywhere from just 2 to 5 women in like a 50-member department.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was, some really kind of like, when I look back at my experience, I was like, wow, there was some blatant disrespect really from the students. It wasn't from the faculty, it was from my peers. Actually, there was some blatant sexist disrespect. And while I still made it through, I frankly wish that I didn't also get a complimentary PhD in banging my head with a 2x4. Like a lot of that self-hatred. I mean,
yeah.
It wasn't all just from that, but probably didn't help that, like, people were saying, oh, not bad for a girl, or see if you can tell the difference between who plays, between my use of horn. I play the horn versus she plays the horn. It was just really kind of some, mean things. And I feel like, as a mentor, that I want to bring that support that I wish I had when I was in college.
Yeah, that's certainly something to look at. I mean, I remember William Patterson, even some 100 music students in the program. There's only like 3 or 4 female musicians, and I know that men on the scene have their talk about females in derogatory terms. I've heard it in the backstage, or if there's a great female artist, well, she must have been screwing this guy to get that gig, or all that stuff. But I hope that over time that changes, and we're certainly really pleased to have you part of the series, because we want more female viewers and people watching. Before we finish up, how have you been managing with the coronavirus epidemic? Because it's a big hit to the scene everywhere,
Yeah. Let's see. Personally, we've actually, Shannon and I have been actually doing fairly, just on a personal level, fairly okay, just because we're both semi-introverted in nature. So actually, in some ways, this has kind of felt like, okay, we don't have to always be putting up, like a facade out in public, so much. We're a little bit more relaxed as far as that goes, and free to kind of be ourselves. But at the other hand, though, it's really saddening and maddening, a lot of the news around, like, first of all, the jazz community has been really hit. There's been, sadly, a lot of people, have passed away because of this pandemic. People that I know, that friends of ours have known closely, musicians I have admired, passed away. I mean, one really like bright light story, I mean, it was scary, but bright light was when we heard that Ron Wilkins made a full recovery from COVID after being in a coma for 32 days. So that was great news, at least to hear that he recovered from that. Although it was scary during that whole time. Like, we were like so worried that, like, was he going to make it? Because there's been so many people that have not. And then it's very maddening out there when I see so many, like, people are just trying to push to reopen prematurely on things. I'm very maddened that we're like the one country that has not seemed to get a hold on this pandemic in the world. So I've been kind of mad about that and very sad about all that. But on a personal level, I've been keeping busy with some personal projects. Actually, the Women in Jazz organization mentors program put together a virtual big band recording of Alone Together. So my mentee, Nishiyama, and I, we wrote an arrangement for 45 musicians.
Wow.
Kind of, yeah. It was like 14 reeds, 6 trumpets, only 2 trombones though, like 6 pianos, 3 bassists. It was a very bizarre instrumentation, but it was really fun. So we, you and I had Zoom meetings like about every 3 days or so, and just kind of like we kind of discussed the arrangement, bounced ideas off of each other, kind of wrote the arrangement from the outside going inward. So hopefully when we met at the middle, it didn't feel too disjunct. So we did that. I'm also writing a piece for baritone saxophonist Andrew Hadro, for him and a double string quartet currently. I'm also trying to write some stuff for our own band and do some catch up on some other arrangements that I still have yet to finish. So.
Well, we hope to see more stuff from you in the coming future. Thank you so much for doing this interview.
Thank you so much, Jonah.
Yeah. Where can people check you out, check out your music? Right.
So we have 2 websites. First one, my personal website is www.ericaseguine.com. And then there's our band orchestras page. So that's www.ESSBJO.com, which is short for Erica Seguine Shan Baker Jazz Orchestra. And we also have a YouTube channel, so you can check us out. Yeah.
Well, we will try to include some of those links. Thanks again for doing this interview, Erica.
Thank you, Jonah.